Hello, welcome to the April 30th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance via clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which Cubase version you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you're running version 11, 12, 13, and which operating system, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all the topics discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could check that later today. So if you wanted to see all the topics that have been covered, you could quickly use that as a reference. When asking questions, also, if we could realize that I may not be able to answer all the questions in a real-time manner, so if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. It just makes it go faster. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful website for that. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this for the betterment of the community. And we'll give special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for Steinberg users. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. All right. And today is the last live stream of the month, so we will be doing our Zoom social in about 2 hours. So I pasted a link to that. Looking forward to seeing everyone on the Zoom. All right. So we see Michael Marshall says, greetings from Somerset, UK. Welcome back to the land of the living dead, Greg. All right. So yeah, I'm sorry I had to cancel Friday's live stream. Just had a medical thing come up. So it was good that I didn't do the live stream with that. All right. But I'm feeling fine now. Thank you for everyone's asking. All right. So we see from, let me just clear my throat. All right. So we see from Best Cream Jesus. Question about workflow. I'm chopping samples. I want to save each slice separately for future use. I wanted to see how you would do it to see if there are any features I might be missing. Currently mapping it to Groove Agent, then dissolving by pitch, and then managing the files in the pools. Okay, so let's say if I was doing something like that, so let's say we have a Groove Agent instance. We will come over here. I'm going to drag this loop into an instrument pad. Let me switch to instrument pad here. Let's drag the loop. I'm going to create slices. I'm going to now switch back to our pattern pad. And I'm going to drag this to our event. Okay. So let's say if we wanted to now render each of these drums as separate files, all we would have to do is how I would approach it is maybe utilizing a quick macro. So let's make a macro. So we'll go to our key commands and we'll come over and I'm going to do a new macro and we'll call it split at MIDI note. All right, so I think we could just go to, let's come over here. So we'll go to next event. locate next event, and then we want to, I think there's just a split or cut. Split at cursor. I think that this might work. So let's add that command. So I'm going to have this event selected, and then if I just run this macro multiple times, we just okay. So let's make this the active window here. All right, let me just see if we get this going to the next note. Get that command. All right, let me just find a modifier key. It's not that. Just so what I want to try to do is to split at the particular MIDI notes. Okay, so if we have this window, let's see if we can now open up our macro. It could be just a window focus issue. Let me just see if this is the right. So we may have to switch the focus. Let me just, because we can navigate to the next note here. All right, so I think if we just went here, and we could probably do it in a macro, and we choose to now switch the window focus, and we split at the cursor. So I think just Option X. Then we come down here. So what my macro would do is basically automate this process. I got the focus. I may have to switch between different Windows zones. So, but I think if we do it like this, so I got the macro dialed in, which I could have for Friday's live stream, then once we have this kind of split at the notes, you know, and I'll just kind of imitate it here. That the approach I would take is, once we got this macro dialed in, is to just, now that we have all of those events, I would do a render in place. Let's go to render in settings and set it, and we would do this as separate events. So now each of those drum sounds, let me just get that set up again. Then should try it as block events, see if that makes a difference. But that's how I would approach it, is probably just doing it like that, and that way you could do a render in place, and then we have all the events selected. And that should allow you to kind of take each of the, some reason it's rendering as one file, but that should allow you to take each individual file and have it rendered simultaneously like that. Also, you know, it might be another approach is, let's say we have our original loop here, and this may be even probably a smarter approach now that you think about it. But if you wanted those as files, we go into our sample editor. Let's go to hit points, and we will make, so we'll find our hit points here, and then we could go under create. We could choose create events, and now each of these events are created. And let's try the render in place one more time. Okay, I think I know what's causing that. All right. All right, so I'm not going to have the track selected, but just the particular events selected here. And now when we go to render in place, we choose a separate events. So give that a try as well. Sorry about that. Taking a little while to get that sorted out. But I'll see if I get that macro to switch between the different zones for you, Best Green Jesus. Eric Sampson asked from Paris, watch your video about recording and monitoring with effects from July 27, 2022. I'm in the same configuration. I wanted to record while hearing, but not printing effects. My audio interface round trip latency is 7 milliseconds. I just have 3 milliseconds of latency from the VST bass amp plugin. I've disabled direct monitoring, but when I enable the monitor button, I have a huge latency, like half a second. I don't know what to try to remove that latency. It's just unusable. Any help appreciated. All right, so, you know, it could be that, you know, you may have other plugins that are in the system. So, you know, that could be adding to that latency. So when you go to your let's go to your mix console. You know, one of the things that you could actually look at is one of the little settings that we could have, let's just come right over here, is you could actually see kind of the channel latency. So right at the very bottom. So as we would add different plugins, so, you know, when we come over here to say inserts and let's add a like a vocal chain, once we add particular plugins, we could see how much latency is going on in the system and how much each plugin is causing for the latency. So if you have like plugins that are, you know, set up for room corrections, like a Sonar Works or VSX headphones, you know, and those are set up in a control room, those are also adding to latency. One quick way to test that is if you just go to the lower left-hand corner and try to activate the constrained delay compensation. So at this point, we could just turn this on, and that would bypass plugins that are causing additional latency above a certain threshold. So I would try that, but you know, it's probably plugins in other parts of the program that are causing the latency that maybe you don't see on a particular track. Okay, so we have Eric Sampson has a question/request. There's an automatic input-output folder. I'd like to separate inputs and outputs into two different folders. How can I do that? All right, so I think if we come over here, we can see our folders here. So let's see if we have our inputs. So I think if we, let's see if we automate our inputs here. So let's just come over to our mix console. Let's add an input channel. All right, so now you can see that our inputs and outputs are in one particular folder, but let's say if we wanted to add a folder track, let's see if this is movable or if it's fixed. You can manually add your inputs and outputs into different folders if you wanted to. So you could just simply add an input and an output folder. It may be still labeled as input-output channels, but if you needed to separate them, you could do that directly right there. All right, Eric Sampson asks, is there a clipper plugin in Cubase? So let's go ahead. So when we come over, I think you'll see it under Dynamics, that you'll see soft clip. Just yeah, the soft clipper under distortion. So if you wanted to look under the distortion category. So now you could just come over here under distortion and you'll see soft clipper. So there is one that's included. All right, wonderful to see Kerwin Young on. We see that Uno Momento is on the road now, but he's whacked the like button. All right, Patrick asks, how do I export mono tracks into one channel mono files or stems? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so I'll just do a small portion of it. So we have mono files here, so I want to take and do stems. So we'll go to our file menu to export to audio mixdown, and we're going to choose multiple, and I'll just do a few tracks here. And as we do this, we'll have the choice on effects, and we want to choose disabled dry. So that would keep your mono channels mono. I'm going to create audio tracks, and we'll say export audio mixdown instead of each of these being rendered as a stereo output. That now when we render, they're going to be rendered as mono files like that. So once again, go to your file, export audio mixdown, and we will choose under effects, choose disabled dry, and then that would retain the channel width of the particular files. Wonderful. See Sable Winters on. All right, so we see from Patrick, how can I imprint loop points into an audio file? So Cubase doesn't do that. Wavelab has the capability of doing that so that it could be kind of read as kind of a generic loop by many different programs. Not all programs will read the loops, but there isn't a particular function in Cubase for that. All right, wonderful to see Alexander Plasko from Connecticut. All right, so we have Best Green Jesus just asks, any hints on a guest for the Zoom? So I didn't line up a special guest. I was sick over the weekend, so I didn't have time to really kind of line anyone up. So we'll just kind of get together and catch up. So sorry, we'll try to have a special guest for the next Zoom social meetup at the end of May. All right, wonderful to see. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, wonderful to see Dean Garvey Jazz from California. All right, so we see from Roger Cabo. Hi, Greg. Unfortunately, I can't solve Media Bay install issue after a long period of having a pause with Cubase. And tells me anything of installation not trusted. Part 1, Cubase 13 Pro. Let me see if there's more. Okay, so I think, so let's take a look at the Steinberg download assistant here real quick. And I think that you could install it separately, or it may, there's a change. It kind of came in sync with Halion Sonic 7 and different updates. But let's take a look. If we come over here to our Cubase Pro 13, and let's see if the Media Bay is a separate install. Or if it's just part of the program. But I think you could get it from the website. So it looks like it's automatically installed with the Steinberg download assistant, but looks like if you go to here, that you can download it separately. So see if you've downloaded that particular, the Media Bay from this location. So if you just look for Steinberg Media Bay install and see if that works for you, Roger. All right, so we have Hype Aid Music, just from Atlanta joining us. We have Parabot2 saying hi to everyone from Australia. See Vincent says greetings, Greg. Hope you're doing well. So yeah, feeling much better today. Thank you. All right, so we see DJFK just says greetings from Germany. Thanks for your work. So you're welcome. We have Trevor from South Africa. All right, so Dallas LaRue asks, is it possible to import a song into Cubase and change the key without artifacts using musical mode or transpose? So anytime that you're going to alter a file, whether you're transposing audio or time stretching it, changing the length, there's always going to be some artifacts that will be introduced. I think that there are kind of industry standard algorithms which Cubase uses to work on for the time stretching and pitch shifting, but depending on the material itself, it could impose artifacts. If it's going to be something that's a very dense mix or something very atmospheric, you may have different results than something that's very dense or something that's very sparse. So anytime that you're doing processing, you're always going to have some artifacts. So, but you could always try to, once we come over here, just try the different elastique algorithms are good, and the standard algorithms. If the elastique isn't giving you the results that you think, always try the standard algorithms as well. So, but, experiment with those different algorithms. All right, Mosky or Mosky Marketing says, hi Greg, I'd like to know each command of VST Connect Pro. I use 10.5 Cubase, how to avoid latency to performer. When my musician records guitar with the track I send him, it delays. And we see question continued. How to set up and receive performers recorded audio material of my DAW's backup track, because receive it out of sync. I use Connect Pro 4.0. So, check out when you're doing this. We'll see. All right, so one of the things, like when you're recording, it seems like you'd want, I think one of the things that you could do when you're doing the recording that throws people off, so we'll come over here to our, so as we're working with this, but try on the performer's track, and this seems counterintuitive at first, but since it's being routed through VST Connect, try to not enable the monitor, and I think that would probably solve it for you. So just record, enable it, but not monitor it, because then you're actually kind of sending the monitored signal back through the path. So try just to not enable monitor on the VST Connect, and let me know if that helps for you. All right, so we have Sato checking in from Lebanon. Thanks for joining us this evening for you. All right, Felix asks, hi there, I have a Cubase Pro 11. I was wondering if I could create impulse response with SimAmp. I'm using Amplitude 5. I tried using Test Generator, but I can't figure out the connections correctly. So one of the things you could do is if you're trying to like send an impulse, so what you want to do is to send an impulse, from let's say Cubase to an output of the device, and that impulse will be sent from the device, and we want to record the audio output of that. So if we go to add an effects channel, so we'll come over here and let's add reverence, and reverence is a convolution based effect. And when we actually come over here and click here, we could actually just trigger the impulse. So I'll just make this a little louder. So if we have kind of nothing at this point, this is the impulse. So we could take the output of this, feed it into, if you're going into a guitar amp, click there, send this channel's output to the guitar signal, and then take the microphone that you're capturing it and set that microphone as an audio track input, but you could actually generate the impulse directly from reverence. So you could just adjust the mix down of the reverb, but this allows you to kind of audition different rooms, but you could just actually trigger and audition different impulses like so. But if you have this again set to 0, then that could be your impulse trigger that could then be captured through a microphone. All right, Ace Amadeus asks, says, hope you're doing well. In Cubase 13, can you please show how to fine-tune vocals to a certain scale, for example, rock blues scale? Thanks. Okay, so when we have vocals, and we want those to be quantized to a particular scale, okay, so let's say we go to Vary Audio. And Vary Audio has a scale assistant. So at this point, we could say, okay, I want this to be in B. Set that as our root. And we could say, I want this to be, a B pentatonic. You could create your own scales if you need to. So let's say we want this to be, a B pentatonic scale. And then what we could do is quantize the pitches to a B pentatonic scale. So you could set that directly here within the scale assistant of Vary Audio. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom link one more time. We'll try to do this about every half hour. All right, wonderful to see Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, and we have Stephen in Sarasota. All right, so Taylor asks, in the Noise Gate plugin, how do I determine how much peak or RMS to use? That really could depend upon the material itself. So let's come over to like a drum project here. So let's say we want to listen to our drums and put our gate on. So here we hear like tracks bleeding through, like our snare, which is kind of inevitable with drums, with live drums. So we'll come over to our dynamics and we'll go to the gate. So now that we just kind of turn this on, you know, we're gating out the other sources. And as for whether you want to, you know, figure out, you know, exactly what the peak is, you know, what the threshold is generally what you're kind of concerned about with the gate, or if you want it to be like, let's say you have kind of an underlying noise instead of something like a snare that's popping through, but maybe you have more of like a hum and you wanted to get rid of the hum that was more constant. That's when you could use more of the RMS to use, but you know, you just kind of play around with the results, and usually the default settings work really well for the gate. So, but that would, you know, so if you have an occasional, like, you know, snare hit or something that happened, you could use peak for that. Or if you have something that's more constant, I would use more RMS settings for that. All right, so Balsa asks, hi Greg, how to render in place insert effects versus insert effects and send effects, and how to render in place mono. Salute from Montenegro. All right, so I'll take a small portion of this, and let's say I'll put a distortion on as an insert effect. And I will add a send of okay. So now I want to take this particular area here. So let's say we want to now go to render in place. All right, so we'll come over here to render in place. So I'm going to have just that particular render setting. So when we say dry, this would be with no effects. So we could render, and as we listen to it, none of the inserts, none of the sends are rendered. When we choose to, and that would also maintain the channel width. So now when we go to render in place, we'll come over to our render settings, we'll go to our channel settings, and the channel settings would include like the inserts, channel strip, and the EQ. So now we render that, and that would still maintain the channel width, but we're going to add the distortion on. So as we go to listen, so again, now since we're running it through a stereo bus and we wanted to now include the send effects, when we go to render in place and go to render settings, we could choose complete signal path. And as soon as we do this, now since it's going through a stereo bus, it's going to include the different effects, and that will make it into a stereo file. So again, once we go to the render in place, Go to your render settings. So this would be completely dry. This would be inserts, channel strip, EQ. This would be send effects and any processing on groups. And this would be also include the master effects in your rendering. All right, so we see from Vincent, for some reason I've kept on delaying implementing Workspaces into my workflow. Anyway, have I understood correctly that Workspaces does not save everything you currently set up? For example, not channel selection. All right, so basically it's going to give you kind of like a template of the windows. So I don't think that would include channel selection. But let's say if I want this as a workspace, I want this event selected, that channel selected. We'll come over and create a new workspace. So think of it more as kind of window layouts. So let's come over here and let's get to my Yeah, so it's not necessarily like what content is selected, because we often want workspaces to work between different projects. So we can think of it as, now I want to see like the mixer. I wanted to see, my send laid out for me. I want to see different workspaces. Okay, this is my tracking view. So, but you could have kind of global workspaces and project workspaces. So sometimes you may want to have like, a score editor for a particular part and have that saved as a project workspace, but that score editor may not exist in another project. So, workspaces aren't necessarily based so heavily on the actual content, but more like what windows are open in different scenarios. And global workspaces are intended to kind of work between, different projects that may have different actual input channels. All right, you see Tim K says he did manage to find a way to swing the upgrade to Pro before the sale ended. Congratulations. All right, so we have a question. In the process logical preset, please explain the instructions to select MIDI notes in cycle. Okay, so I'll add a quick MIDI track here. All right, I'm just going to draw a bunch of notes in here. Okay, so now we could look at this MIDI event. I'll just change colors here quickly. Okay, so I want to select MIDI notes that are within the cycle. So we see our range, our cycle markers are set here and here. So I want to select only those MIDI notes within the cycle. So let's go to your MIDI menu, to Logical Editor, to Setup. So we want to choose Select, type is equal to note, and we could say their position is probably inside cycle. Okay, so now as we do this, I hit apply, and only the notes within the cycle that fall within the cycle range will be selected. Everything else will be not selected. So if I have all these notes selected, I run the logical editor preset, only those particular notes will be selected. So again, for the filter condition, we want to choose select, type is equal to note, position is inside cycle. Let me know if that makes sense. Always wonderful to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. Thanks for joining us. All right, great to see Soren from Sweden. See Tim K's brother-in-law also got a new copy of Cubase Pro during the promotion. All right, so Balsa asks, hi Greg, how do you use input transformer on a VST instrument so no matter how hard or soft I play my MIDI keyboard, all notes have 127 velocity? All right, so let me just... Okay. So we see I have my velocity range here. All right, so let's just go to, I could do this at the track level or we could do it globally. So let's come over here to our project input transformer and we want to transform, and we'll say type is equal to note, and we'll say the velocity set to fixed value of 127. So now, let's see if we need to activate. I'll just try it on the track itself here real quick. So now that we've turned that on, no matter how hard or soft I hit the keys, it will be just a fixed velocity. So if we go to our MIDI monitor here, we could see that the velocity, regardless of how I'm doing it, is automatically going to be a 127. I hit it very softly, very loud. So once again, all you have to do is if you go to the project, and you can do the project input transformer or the local, just choose to transform, type equal to note, velocity, set to fixed value of 127. Okay, Timo asks, hi Greg, I'd be highly interested in how to send MIDI timecode and control video playback on a receiver's computer. Example, sending MIDI timecode via Session Link Pro, same vice versa would be nice. All right, so if you want to send MIDI timecode from Cubase to other devices, all you need to do is go to the transport and you'll go to project synchronization setup. So if you want Cubase to be the master, we could say, okay, we want to just come right over here to destination, and we'll say MIDI timecode destination. So wherever your device is connected to, so if it's a software program, it may have a software MIDI driver that will accept. So right now we could say, okay, so now as I hit play in Cubase, it's going to automatically transmit MIDI timecode to the other device. So go to transport, project synchronization setup. You'll see destinations and you'll see MIDI timecode destination, and you could just check MIDI timecode follows project time. And then all you have to do is choose what MIDI port you want the MIDI timecode sent to. Go into the other device, say it's, I'm receiving MIDI timecode from this particular device, and then other device should be able to synchronize directly with Cubase that way by MIDI timecode. Wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. We have DL White. Great to see you from Fort Worth. Jazzy Lomel asks, hey Greg, I got an email saying that the e-licenser will be discontinued in 2025. Will I still be able to run my older Cubase and VST instruments on the e-licenser or dongle? So yes, basically it's not going to allow you to activate new licenses on e-licenser after in 2025. So. All right, we have a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. How can we draw guitar expressions such as palm mutes, chugga, pick, squeaks, slides, etc., to simulate real electric guitar playing? So we could just utilize that kind of within the particular instrument. I'll show you, one that you could kind of get a sense. So it's really going to be in the design of the instrument if it has that content. So there's not a standard MIDI message, but let's go ahead and add an instrument track. We'll do a Hallian Sonic here, and let's go to like the electric bass because this kind of has some great capabilities with this. So within the instrument itself, it has samples of all these different articulations and slides. So like even if we're just kind of playing it here, because of the instrument and how it's kind of set up, you could even do kind of auto slides. And then as you would go to different articulations here, you could just say, okay, I want this. If you want to be more sustain or more mute, harmonic. So it's really how the instrument is set up and designed to play back those different sounds more than like how Cubase does that. So, depending on your instrument, if the instrument doesn't have that capability, there's no messages in Cubase that can be sent to it to add that capability. But many instruments do have those capabilities and those little articulations to switch between different playing styles. All right. See, Best Green Jesus just says, thank you, Greg, that helped. I'll try to have it more dialed in for Friday for you on the splitting it up. Okay, Dylan M. DeRosa asks, "Hi Greg, is there a quick way to add a start and end automation point to a selected region or event?" All right, so let's say if we have our automation points, so sometimes you could come over within the automation panel itself and activate kind of to start and to end. And then as you would then you could just so once you come over here, you could just do to start and to end, and that will add the automation points for you kind of at the start and end of the particular events. So again, just try coming right over here, and you could hit F6 to get to the automation panel. And if you always want that on, you could double click, but try just setting it, to start or to end. And if you wanted to do it just like within a loop, so say if I'm here and we're looping this section, so say I activate the loop now, and I want to find the automation point for the loop. That once we go to right, so we kind of say, okay, this is the right level. You can now just put that automation points right there between the loop as well. So give that a try with the automation panel. All right, we have Soren Beck, just sending greetings from Denmark. Thanks for joining today. Achilles asks, is it better to use a master limiter as a post fader insert? What is the advantages? So most people would tend to use it as post fader, so that when you are doing a mix, and let's say if you adjust the fader here, that's not going to affect the gain structure going into the limiter. So most people would choose to do that. Otherwise, when you're working, if you have it set to pre-fader, so I think most people would do, where it's not going to be affected. So I guess that would be pre-fader. But you could experiment with, so the only thing to be aware of is, when choosing pre-fader or post-fader, that if you're still adjusting this overall master volume, it could affect the gain structure if you're set to post fader. So all right. So we see question, hi, how can I recover my Cubase if I deleted it by mistake? Can someone help me? So generally it's just going to be, once you have your license, depending on your version, if you're in 12 or 13, once your license is activated, you could just simply reinstall. And then if you don't have enough, you have 3 different activations, so you could run on 3 separate computers. So at that point, if you need to, if you accidentally deleted an activation, you could go into your My Steinberg account and look at your which systems that you have, and you could activate and deactivate. But generally, just kind of reinstalling, I think, will help do the trick for you. I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup info here one more time. All All right, Patrick Manuel A asks, "Hi Greg, is there a way to render all the different send tracks? I want to process it with different plugin." So if, let's say, we'll just jump back to this project, I'll revert. And let's say on my drums, I want to, we'll just add in a reverb to all these tracks. So if I wanted to render my send, my reverb independently, at this point I would go to File to Export Audio Mixdown, and I would choose to create an audio track. And here we could just select our effects channels. We'll select that and say Export Audio. So as we do this, it's going to do it between our left and right locators. And now we just have the reverb that's been rendered. So as soon as we come right over here, we can now, that's the reverb return on all the tracks. So if we play this and we mute this reverb, you hear it very dry. Now we're the rendered reverb. So if we mute that track, so if you want to try out different ideas, again, just go to Export Audio Mixdown, select the effects channels, and create a new audio track. And then you could have the reverb automatically rendered. Try out different. All right, so Patrick Emmanuel A asks, "What's special in today's Zoom meetup?" So we're all getting together and catching up. So we've been looking forward, and we got to learn what Sable Winters has gotten recently. What new toys and gadgets. See, Spa Dog says, "Hi Greg, hope you're feeling better." So I am, thank you. All right, 808 King asks, "Is there a way in settings to allow more insert slots for all tracks or master bus especially? Thanks." So what you could do, so you have 16 inserts. So some people think that's a ridiculous number. Some people it's not enough for them. So, but if you need to, on the master section, if you needed to do more processing, you needed more than 16 inserts, and the master EQ with all of the processing in the channel strip. So if you need it more than this, so that would be EQ, let's say plus 6, so that could give you 22 stages of processing. But if you need it more, what you could do is just simply come select all the tracks, and we could now send this to almost like a pre-master bus. So we'll now right click and we'll add a group track based on the selected channels, and we'll call this pre-master. And here everything is now going into the pre-master bus. And I have lots of unnecessary processing here, but we could, at this point, when we go to, let's say, so everything can go into the pre-master, and then we could do 16 inserts here, EQs, and this pre-master could go to the master bus where you could have an additional 16. So, and you don't have to, there's no consequences really of doing it with that approach. So there's no delay compensation issues or anything. It's all compensated for in time. Harry Dime asks, "Hi, greetings from Cupris. I work in Cubase Pro 11. Is there a way to change the zooming function from Control plus scroll to Alt plus scroll or any other button with the scroll wheel?" So I think that those particular functions are fixed. So when we come here, we can, just I don't think in version 11 that they are assignable, but I'll just take a quick look at one area. Yeah, I think that those are going to be fixed for the settings. Some of the tools you could have some modifiers, but those will be fixed. Sorry about that. All right, so we see DL White says he's stoked he upgraded Cubase 13 from and a new iMac M3. Thanks Steinberg for the sale. I'm now a VST 3.7 to 13 Pro user. Congratulations. Glad you took advantage of the promotion. Okay, so we see from Chronology. I recently downloaded all of Cubase Artist 13. However, I realized that a few VST effects are missing from the plugin manager, in particular the 2 analog EQs. Is there a way to find them? So let me, if you know like which particular EQs that you're talking about. So, sometimes I'm not sure if it was like if you had like a Cubase Pro license. Sometimes there may be plugins that are in Cubase Pro and not in Cubase Artist. But if you could let me know which 2 particular plugins, if it's like the new like Pultec style plugins, those may not come in Artist. I'll take a quick look. So go to Effects. So the frequency EQ is not going to be an Artist. Let me just see if it's, I'll just refresh my memory on the Pultec. So we see frequency isn't. Yeah, so the EQ M5 and the EQ P1A, if those are the ones, those are only in Pro. So if it's one of these that you're thinking of, this is, I think, only in Pro. Kind of the Pultec style EQs. So those don't come with Artist, but in Pro. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer Sr. from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, Harry Dime asks, how can I change the project folder and pool record folder? In the pool, I right-clicked in the project folder path in the pool, but there's no such option. All right, so let's take a look. I'll hit Control-Command-P. Okay, so I think what you could do is, like, if we added tracks, so let me just add a number of tracks here. And then right click on the tracks. Here you could set the record folder right there, so you don't have to do it within the pool, but you could do it within the tracks themselves for newly recorded tracks. But let's take a look. Let's get to the pool window here. So let's say all right, so and then once we click on so that will kind of follow that. So try just, let me know if right clicking here would and choosing set record folder, if that would help with your scenario. And if you wanted to like take the whole project and put it into a different folder and kind of consolidate all the files, one of the things you could do is just come over here and choose the backup project and then choose a new folder there. Then all the files could be moved to a new folder that you choose. All right, John Carpenter asks about the update to Cubase 13 from 9.5. Anything I should know or do ahead of time to make it a seamless transition? Also, any issues when I do get up and running to remove 9.5 to clean up disk space? So usually, like the actual Cubase program doesn't take a huge amount of disk space. So unless you're really kind of short on disk space, you could probably leave it just as a transition. But realize that one of the things in kind of doing this, like when we went from 11 to 12, there's a change in the licensing systems. So going from the USB-E licenser to Steinberg licensing, which is kind of an account-based system. So realize that you're going to it's going to be kind of a two-step process. You're going to update your e-licenser to version 11, and then from version 11, you'll convert that to Cubase 13 on the other licensing system. So just kind of follow the directions, but it's pretty straightforward. But realize it's kind of a two-step process to do that because you're kind of jumping up 5 or 6 versions. All right, John Carpenter asks, hi Greg, do you know if there's a way to render in place to a mono file? I have a MIDI VST guitar track and looking to bounce it down to wave and mono. When I do render it, bounces to stereo thing. So generally it's the render in place is going to follow the outputs of the instrument itself. So the intention of render in place is that it's going to sound exactly the same afterwards. So realize that your VST instrument is a stereo output, and that's what you're hearing, and that's why it's going to render it as a stereo file. So it's the instrument itself is outputting stereo, even though we think of a guitar track as often being a mono source, but the VST instrument is outputting stereo, and that's why it's going to render stereo. If your VST instrument had a mono output, at that point it would render it as mono, but that way it sounds the same and doesn't change the tone. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely from California. All right, Igor Garcia asks, in the sampler track, is there a way to automate the sample start example to modulate it with LFOs? Thanks for in-depth help you provide every week. So you can modulate it with LFOs, but I'm not sure if it's the sample start position, but I think you might be able to achieve what you want. So let's just come over, activate this project. All right, so we'll go to our sampler control here. All right, so and then once you're kind of here, so it may not be so much the sampler start, but if you want it to, let's go to our amplifier and we go to our modulation. So at this point we could choose just to just on the very beginning of the sample, let's say the attack of the sample, you know, at this point we could come over and draw in, you know, different envelopes, and we could just kind of paint. So at this point we could choose different envelopes or make your own envelope. So it may not be the exact sample start, but I think that you could do lots of different modulation capabilities. So what you want to do is, again, just come over here to the modulation, and then if you want to kind of paint in different modulation steps, you can play around with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, great to see Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, we have Stefan from Switzerland asks, is a following problem on track. When I use mute or solo button on a track, nothing happens, but the other tracks work. Do you know this problem? So sometimes when I've seen, I had a friend who kind of ran into something similar, where he's having like a weird thing. And I think what he had done was, you know, like when we draw in mute automation, we often kind of have, you know, on or off, kind of very polar. But what I've seen happen sometimes, check if you have mute automation, like if you have, and somehow he had actually entered in like multiple values, like he drew in multiple values. So look, and once we erased kind of duplicative values in the automation, that it seemed to work as expected. So check out like your mute automation and just make sure, like sometimes you may, if you have a controller, maybe you hit the mute button while it was already muted. But you know, I've seen projects where people accidentally, and maybe it's prevented now, where, they had multiple kind of mute on messages in a row, and that was causing an issue. So check that and see if you have multiple values that are similar in a row. So, if you have like 3 or 4 mute on and 4 or 5 mute offs in a row, how that can make. So check that in the automation. All right, we see Jeff Sabelski checking in from Chico. All right, so Soren asks, Greg, am I doing this right? When I edit MIDI, I want it to follow, could be the same as the vocal, vary audio, and extract. I have 2 MIDI events in my edit window. Then when should I draw a note in one of the events where the vary audio tone, then it gets mixed up? Instead of drawing to the MIDI tone, I want to start drawing in the vary audio event. Something is wrong. All right, so okay, so let's see if we could get this figured out for you, Soren. All right. Okay. So we're going to extract this MIDI. We're going to make a okay. So I'll move this track right below. Okay, so this is our extracted MIDI. Okay, and he has 2 MIDI events, so let me just add a MIDI track again. Okay. All right, so it's 2 MIDI events. My edit window continued when I created. Then when I should draw a note, one of the events, then where the vary audio tone is, it gets mixed up. Instead of drawing the MIDI tone I want, I start drawing in the vary audio event. Something is wrong. Okay, so let's say we have our vocals here and our vary audio, and I'm just going to switch the colors here to make it more obvious between the two. All right, so we're going to go into my MIDI editor, and first thing we want to do is, let's say we'll take it to our full screen. All right, let me just make sure I have. Okay, so I'm just going to draw some notes in this event here so we could differentiate it. Okay, so now we can see this, and let's just kind of pop over here. So make sure that you'll see like this little stack of, almost like a stack of papers. And when you click here, you could say, let's make this the active part. So let's say I want only this to be the active part where we had our vary audio. So now I'm drawing in, and then when we want to, we could say you may have it set to all parts, and then that might be kind of entering in data into the wrong events. So try, just check your settings here. And maybe just set it to active part Soren. And then I think you could see the reference of one and still edit in your very audio track. All right, Darren Mack asks, "Hi Greg, I created a preset using Steinberg Gate in Cubase Pro 13 last night. I goofed twice. I misspelled the preset and then duplicated it. How can I manage and edit the presets I create?" Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get to our dynamics. I'll create a preset. All right, so say I spelled Darren wrong. Okay, so I use 2 R's instead of 1 R. So Darren spells his name. All right. So if we want to change that, let's come over to Media Bay. And we will go to User Content, to VST3 presets. We'll say Steinberg. Right, so we see Darren here. So I spelled this wrong. Let me just see. I think if we go to Reveal in Finder or Reveal in Explorer by right-clicking, now we could rename here. Right, and now we open up Media Bay. Again, we can see that it's only 1 R, so you could kind of just correct that. So find it in, the user presets area, and then right-click, Reveal in Finder on Mac. I think on Windows it's Reveal in Explorer, and then you should be able to go right there and rename it. Okay. All right, 808 King asks, let me clear my throat. Question, what's the difference between load effects chain preset and from track preset? Seems like the same thing. So when we see an effects chain preset, that's just going to be our inserts. So it's only inserts, whereas a track preset can contain the volume, panning, EQs, and all of our channel strip settings. So all of these things are going to be included within a track preset, but an effects chain preset is only going to be kind of a collection of inserts. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup link. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Braxel from Texas. All right, we see Learn with Steven says routing question. I think the Guitar Rig 7 that came with Cubase 13 Pro as voucher is available as insert other, but its stereo effects are mono only. Any ideas? Thanks. So probably what you need to do is on the track itself, you could have the track be mono or stereo. So you'll see this little dot right here. So you'll see one circle if you're on a mono track and you want the effects to be in stereo. Click right there and you'll get this little message that will now take your mono source on that track and make it a stereo track. So just click where you see one single circle here. You go from mono to a stereo track, and then your inserts can be in stereo. So if you have stereo delays, you can just use it just like that. See, Jeff Sabelski says, in full tux and tails, I conducted our Paradise Symphony Orchestra parade float in Paradise last Saturday for the Golden Nugget Parade. I had countless people conducting with both arms right back at me. Sounds like fun. Wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. So we see songs of the IVIE brothers. Is there any way to get Steinberg Pro 24 files into Cubase Artist 11? I actually started with Pro 24 and the Atari back in the 80s. So I'm not sure if they even were, I started at Cubase 2 on Atari, and I don't think that would even allow you. I'm not sure if they were shared file formats. If it's a .all or .arr file, you could go to Cubase. Your Cubase 11 license would work with Cubase SX3. So you could open up Cubase SX3 or and with your Cubase 11 license, and you could import a .all or .arr files and have those saved as a CPR file. But other than that, I never ran Pro 24. So, but if it's a .all file, but I don't remember even on version 2 of it importing Pro 24 projects. So, but you could always export it probably as a standard MIDI file. All right, so a question: what is the most efficient way to use a third-party step sequencer plugin in a Cubase 13 project? So a lot of them may, like if you have particular plugins that output MIDI, probably the most common method for doing that is to, let's just come over. So like this Groove Agent instance outputs MIDI, so it has, we could think of it as its own internal sequencer. So this will play back MIDI patterns. So what you could do now is add a MIDI track. So what most of them would do is, and you set for the MIDI input port, you could now just come over here and set it from the plugin. So you can say, okay, I want this track to have its input from Groove Agent. And then the MIDI output from the plugin is then captured as MIDI data as if it was a physical controller connected to the program. But it could depend on if the third-party program is set up that way. All right, so a question. Hi, Greg. What I can do if my fader assigned to a MIDI remote doesn't react when I move it on my MIDI controller? So let's come over here. Let's say we have a number of tracks. I'll go to my MIDI remote here. Let's go to, all right, so I want this to be set up on mixer. All right, so when I move, let's say my 4 channels here, I'll go to my Cubase mixer, and as we scroll, so it could be that, you know, you could see which faders, which channels are actually controlled by this little white line between like the track control settings and the track header. So it could be that maybe you're, you know, we can see this white line indicated here. So if we go to bank, here we could just control, you know, so it could be that maybe you're on the wrong bank. I'll just show it with a new project here. All right, so now I can control these channels. If I select this channel, so we could bank. So like as we would, you know, hit the bank key, I could control this fader. So, you know, depending on how your MIDI remote is set up, if it's going to bank, you could just kind of select your particular channel. So it could be, look for the little white outline indicating which particular channels are being controlled by your MIDI remote. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. When multiple audio tracks are selected, we'll like to create a VCA fader to control the selected tracks faders in proportion. All right, so let's say we have all of these tracks set up here. So I'm going to select these particular tracks. I'm going to right click, and then what I want to do is, so as we right click with the selected tracks in the mix console, we can say add VCA fader to selected channels. And now we can see our VCA fader here. And that's all you would have to do. So select the channels, right click, add VCA fader to selected channels, and then you could adjust the VCA fader and all those will go up and down. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios. Hi, Greg. Just upgraded Cubase 13 last weekend. Congratulations. Glad you were able to do that, take advantage of the promotion. And came across something which probably was there before. Spectrum Analyzer. Does it analyze at a point in time or the whole event? So it's going to, so when we do that, it's going to actually just do not the point of time, but the selected event. So we'll show it here quickly. So if we want to look at that, we would come over to your audio and we see the Spectrum Analyzer. So that would be the whole event. And if you wanted it kind of at specific moments in time, you know, you could, if you want to see kind of real-time interaction, that's when it's always a good time to perhaps use the Supervision plugin in the control room, or just using the Supervision plugin. So if we just get to your inserts here, we can see, okay, Supervision, and then at that point you could see everything that's kind of going on, and you could put this into go into Spectral. So like as you would play back a particular project, you could come over and see it there. All right, so we see Jay for Secret Studios also asked, Greg, also can Spectrum Analyzer analyze the frequency activity of multiple events to get a summary of which frequencies may have a void in production for instruments? So the original Spectrum Analyzer is just going to be for the particular selected events. It's not going to do a comparison and contrast between different tracks, but you could set that up within Supervision to do that. See, Jeff Sabelski's getting used to the new Cubase 13 mixer. He likes the new channel strip and inspector. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how would we do channel filtering for 16 MIDI channels in one go using the logical editor? So if you wanted to like filter out channels, like where you're only having one particular MIDI channel going to a device, what you could do is using the input transformer. Let's come over here, and there's presets for these, but basically under factory presets you'll see channel filtering, and this way you can say pass only channel 4 for this channel. So it's going to filter out any channel unequal to 4. So you could use that for doing your filtering, so that way you could do it in real time. And so let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. All right, Paul Claridge asks, hello Greg, is there a way to set one of the encoder knobs on my MIDI controller to act like the jog wheel on my Zoom R16, which is problematic on Cubase? So a lot of the jog wheels on MIDI controllers as a transmit MIDI, some will be smart and transmit different values when you rotate to the right or rotate to the left. But many of them will just, as you move it right or left, will increase or decrease, but not different values. So you need an encoder that's, when it's sending MIDI information, that it's actually sending different values. So a lot of them may not do that. All right, so you see Patrick just asking when is the Zoom call, so we'll start in about 15 minutes. I'm going to get to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a question about how to work with overlapping events. So let's say, when we have overlapping events, if you have events and you see that all of a sudden you see these like diagonal dashes in particular events, that means that underneath this event, there's another audio event that you could pick and choose. So even if we want to switch between different takes, I could say, okay, I want this to start this track and I want that performance to go right there. We could just switch by going into the bottom center and you could see all the different takes. Now, another method that people use for managing overlapping audio is when you go to your preferences and go to editing, something called delete overlap. So if you don't want overlapping audio, now as I take an event over top, what it's going to do is instead of, we don't see the diagonal lines because those have now been deleted because we have delete overlaps turned on. So without delete overlaps enabled in the preferences, we come right here, drag it across, and we see more diagonal lines, and we move the event back. The underlying events are still there. And when delete overlaps is enabled, we can now drag this over, and those events are gone. I think we could still get them back if you need to. So that's how we could work with multiple overlapping events. All right, let me open up my Word document and read the other ones. All right, so we had a question, how to duplicate events to be aligned with the grid. And I think this is kind of doing like a kick sample type of scenario. Okay, so let's say I drag this event on, and I want to do like a 4 on the floor scenario. So the question I often get, so we have this start on the grid, and then as we duplicate across, we duplicate, but we can see that it's not duplicating based on the grid. So if we want to duplicate this based on a grid, because what it's doing is we chose to duplicate the event, and if the event doesn't match the length of the grid, the event will just go straight to the back. So I'm going to utilize the range tool. We'll select the range for the grid here. So, and we could just turn on J for snap so that that can automatically align. And now we just hit Control or Command plus the letter D for duplicate. And now we could duplicate and have it on the grid just like that. So that way we duplicate the range of the beat as opposed to just duplicating the particular event. All right. So we see, hi Greg, can you show a simple setup for Q for one vocalist? Cubase 13 Pro audio interface has 2 outputs. I think to have the control room Q function is best for vocals in the long term. I must take time to set up the Q for the vocalist. Yeah, so even if you have like one output, if you needed to quickly kind of go back and forth between different scenarios, so let's say if the singer wants to hear themselves louder, kind of a typical more me type of mix. So what we could do, and if you only have one output, so ideally you'd want to have multiple outputs, but I think we could make this work. So let's say we have our vocals here.
Do you recall the day we first met?
Sorry, I have a test tone generator somewhere in there for some right.
That was a long, long time ago.
All right, let me find a better version of this project out of respect for my friend. All right. All right, so I'm going to just create, even if I have 2 stereo outputs, I'm going to go into my audio connections, and let's go to our control room, and I'm going to add a Q mix. So right click, add a Q mix. So we'll just call this vocals here. All right, so what I want to do is we'll go into like our full mix console here. And let's go to our cues. And I'm going to select the channels. And at this point, we could just right click in a blank area, and we go to we want to activate the Q sends, and then we could use the current mix levels. Okay, so let's say we get to our lead vocals and we want more lead vocal in their Q mix, but we don't want to affect our mix. So let's say we are here, and as we're listening,
Waiting on our yellow coach.
When we're recording with the singer, we could just say, okay, we want to listen to Q mix 1.
In your heart, heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
And we could just switch. So even if we don't have a separate dedicated output while recording, we could provide a cue mix for the musician so that they could hear what they need to hear, and we could just quickly switch back and forth between your mix and the cue mix right here using the control room. All right, so we got a question. Hi, Greg. You know, in below live stream link, you to balance multiple event with gaps to one equal length in project. But if I was looking closely, your balance file, I noticed it's not from the event beginning. I got the same issues you when I went to grid zoom. All right, so I guess how to make an equal length file of all the events. So say I want to take these files here and make equal lengths of these files. So I'm going to set it I'm going to set the left and right locators. So I'm going to select the event, hit the letter P, and then I'm going to select these particular events. And I think if we just go to bounce selection, let's see. All right, so we could keep them all there, but let's now keep. All right, so I'm going to now select the range tool, and we could. And let's see if the bounce selection audio works here with the range. Then you could just use the range selection tool and then just bounce the audio, do a bounce selection, and that will automatically give you the same length files. All right, question. When I'm editing a Groove Agent 5 track in the edit window using Windows 10 and Cubase 13, I'm not seeing the scissor tool when I right click. If I have another track in the edit window, I do have the option. Now, do I have a drum map when I go into the edit window, but it has to cut the drum track? I have to close out the edit window to do so. All right, so let's just take a look. All right, so so generally in the MIDI editors themselves, you don't have like a scissors tool, whether it's so if you're doing maybe an in-place edit, if you hold down Control Shift I, then you could cut the events, but so you could once you're here, you could cut other events, but within the MIDI editor itself, the tools are different because we're not necessarily cutting the scissors tool is used to kind of split the event, not necessarily the notes. So that's why, when we double click to launch the editor, we're looking at a particular event right there. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, hope you're good. I wondered if there's an easier way to adjust a tempo map. I'll explain the challenge I find. Say I have tempo changes as follows: 150 beat per minute at bar 50, key of E major, 160 BPM at bar 90, key of G, 170 BPM at bar 130, key of C. I have my tempo changes drawn in with the bar numbers, but now I want to see how my medley works if order of musical key progressions rather than tempo. to do this, I have to drag my files to reset the tempo points, but I'm wondering if there's an easier way to do this, like with the arranger track. So I think that the arranger track will allow you to do this quite easily. So let's just jump over. I think I see if I have that file still open. My recent list. I'll open it quickly. So to do this, all you'd have to do is, grab the arranger track for each one. And if you have different tempo changes, and then if you wanted to check the transitions, you could activate the arranger track here and just say, okay, let's.
And I was falling before I knew. All it was to kiss my face.
And then you could just try out. So once you have each song, you could just click on it in the play order.
All it was to kiss my face. The world was falling. Feel good. Feel good.
So once you have kind of different ideas, you could just try and audition these ideas.
Give you their hearts around.
And that way you can check the transitions between the different parts of your arrangement. All right, we had a question. Do you know a source where I could download logical editor presets and macro suggestions for Cubase 13? Check out the Cubase Nation Discord. So you can look for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. There's lots of great stuff, and if you want to, I'll send you my collection of macros and Project Logical Editor presets as well. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to start the Zoom so we could transition over to our Zoom meetup. I'm going to paste in the comments the Zoom link one more time. If you've not attended a Zoom social, it's a great way to kind of meet other people that are on the live stream. Look forward to it every month. All right, so I'll go ahead and start the meeting. All right, so we see Rob joining. Brian, great to see you. See Dean Garvey on. All right, we have Soren joining. David J. Thomas Van Dyke. Give a couple more minutes that people transition over. See comment from Graham, you can't make it tonight to the Zoom. Give it our minute or so, and then we'll get transitioned over. I'll paste a link one more time. Give it our 30 seconds, and then we'll end the live stream. All right, so I'm going to end the live stream and then migrate over to Zoom fully.